Welcome back to Community Conversations with my guest, Paul Berger, with Citizens United for a Sustainable Planet. Now, Paul, we heard already about risks to our area from spills and explosions, really a lack of long-term economic job creation here in the area. That really it's not an issue of pipeline versus rail, because really they want to do both. This is really about expanding foreign exports. What are really our long-term options here in terms of the big picture, the environment? You know, you talked about the floods that have been happening and the major weather catastrophes that have been on the increase. What can we do? What are our options?
Well, the floods, unfortunately, they're only Act 1, right? They're just we've had less than a degree of change so far in terms of the global climate. And we've got a lot more that's coming to us if we don't make different choices. We still have time to not go down that road, but every indication so far is that we're heading down that road quickly. So we're going to see next methane bubbling out of the permafrost in the Arctic and from the sea floor in the shallow Arctic as well. That's going to increase climate change. We're worried about getting a runaway climate change effect, so that we're going to have we'll be locked into 3 to 4 degrees of change. This will be disastrous for human populations, for political stability. We'll have millions of climate refugees and collapse in global relations. It's not a cheery picture that's, if you read the IPCC latest report, every human is being affected and things will get worse. So we really have some urgency in trying to do something different. Linda McQuaig wrote something really interesting the other day. She said, people tend to blame citizens for not wanting to do anything about climate change. She said, that's not true. Citizens in Canada know that we have problems. They'd like there to be different changes. And she said, no, we're not rushing out to buy electric cars. But we live in a society where the government doesn't incentivize that. They give more than $2 billion of subsidies and gifts to the fossil fuel industry to keep fossil fuel cheap. They don't charge for pollution, the carbon dioxide that's causing the climate change. So basically they're doing everything they can to cheerlead and keep things the way they are. Now if the government were to shift, if we as citizens can push our governments to shift, then that'll be different. Then we'll get a reasonable choice to buy a super fuel efficient, very small energy efficient car. Perhaps it'll be electric, perhaps fueled by big wind farms or something like that. But we're not going down that road, Steve. This is what terrifies some of us, is that we have a lot of knowledge, we have choices to make, and yet we keep rushing headlong down the fossil fuels, let's use it all until it's all gone road. It's not really a sane way to act. So I won't claim that we're going to live exactly the same as we do now if we tackle this carbon problem. But I think what we'll do is we'll have a lower energy future. So we'll have incredible public transit. The public transit hopefully will be free, like it is in Akureyri in northern Iceland, for example, or it was free in Paris after they had such terrible fog that they banned cars with an even-numbered license plate on one day and then an odd-numbered license plate on the next day. So they made the public transit free, and then people tend to take it. So we're going to have some differences. We may have less, we may work less and have more time for relationships with families. The world will look different, but it won't be a terrible world. It'll actually be a better world, and it'll be a healthier world. So we need people to start working really hard to push governments to help us get there.
So you really see a major role for government in terms of changing the direction that we're going in terms of climate change and the reliance on fossil fuels.
Absolutely, but with a caveat. None of the big movements in history that have created real change, whether it's the civil rights movement in the United States or Gandhi's push to have Indian independence or the push to have women's voting rights, none of those came from the top down. They weren't started by governments. They happened when movements got together and pushed the governments. So unfortunately right now we have a federal government who has been getting rid of environmental legislation, changing the Navigable Waterways Act, changing the environmental assessment process, doing everything in exactly the wrong direction. And they will keep doing it in that way because of the close ties they have with the big fossil fuel companies. Unless citizens stand up and say, enough, we know where we're going, we don't like it, we need to go somewhere else. Unfortunately, it'd be nice to be able to say, well, just don't vote for them next time, vote for someone else. But as far as I know, the leaders of the two other major political parties both support building pipelines. So they're more nuanced, they're a little bit smarter about the environment maybe, but the final analysis is we need to push all of them to change if we want a future for our children. It used to be people said, your grandchildren and their children. Now we're starting to say your children, and we've already started to see effects in our own lifetime. So the urgency is quite high, and we don't know how to do this, but we know it has to be done, and we want people to join us and work on it.
So how can they join? I mean, traditionally we think, democracy is about electing our leaders. And as you mentioned, we're not really seeing that leadership from really any of the major political parties. You talked about Linda McQuaig, reading one of her recent books. She's showing how the power is shifted in our country so that it's the very, very rich that are really fueling the political parties, and so then they feel obligated to respond with the priorities that will help those wealthy people get wealthier. And I hear, the pipeline companies can blow off $12 million and it's not a big deal. So what are the other options? Like, how can we as citizens become united and build that sustainable planet? What are some of the options we have there?
I think the positive thing is there's a lot of this going on in different ways, but sometimes you don't recognize it as those people over there are allies or our allies. But there's people doing transition town stuff. They're trying to get Thunder Bay and Kenora and other places ready for when the fossil fuels run out. So they're already working on local sustainability, more local food security, things like that. I think we need to link and connect all of the people who already are doing great work. And I also think that we need to just really say to people, if you don't think we have any problem at this point, then probably we have nothing much to speak about, and we won't be able to, let's say, recruit you to help work on this. But if you think there's a problem, if you know there's a problem, then join in with CUSP, join with other people, talk to your neighbors, talk to your kids, talk to your parents. Just start the conversation and see how you can fit in and what you can do. We'd be thrilled if people sent their email addresses to us and we put them on the list, and then when events come up that are important or rallies or protests or petitions or letter writing, that people could decide whether they wanted to take part or not. We don't have a silver bullet. It's going to be a lot of people in a movement saying we need a different direction. But again, the good thing is once you get a lot of people thinking like that, it becomes easier to think like that. And then you get momentum. And I think we're at a point in Canada where we're pretty close to having a lot of that momentum.
Well, Paul, you've given us a lot to think about. Once again, there's a website. It's the Sustainable Planet?
Sustainableplanet.ca.
Okay, so that's how people can get in touch. Thank you so much for coming on. I want to thank the folks here at Shaw Cable TV as well, providing this opportunity. If you want to get in touch with me for ideas or feedback on the show, my email is smantis@tbaytel.net. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.